My fiancée jumped into the sea without hesitation to save another man. I used all my strength to bring her back, but she pushed me back into the water, exhausted. "Go save him!" Later, she stood by my hospital bed and said, "Aren't you a great swimmer?" I turned my head. "Just go. I don't love you anymore." Ding. Story Shots reminds you to click the subscribe button at the bottom right corner to read the full novel. My fiancé and I were taking wedding photos by the sea today, with our wedding scheduled for the end of the year. As the photographer pressed the shutter, our happiness was being recorded. "Rosalie!" Suddenly, someone shouted my fiancé's name. She kept her pose and didn't turn, but her body stiffened. I recognized that man, her childhood friend, Herschel Jimenez. For the past 6 years, he had been an unwelcome presence in our lives. Because of him, Rosalie and I had quarreled countless times. Rosalie always said that if anything happened between them, I wouldn't stand a chance. In the end, I compromised, because I loved her. "Should we pause for a moment?" I asked Rosalie. She shook her head firmly. "Let's finish the wedding photos first." The photographer instructed us to change poses. "Bride, get closer to the groom. Tilt your head back to kiss the groom, and smile bigger." Rosalie tried hard to smile, but her smile was stiff and not natural anymore. Suddenly, there was a splash. Someone jumped into the sea. "Someone's in the water." The crowd by the sea began to scream and shout. Before I could react, Rosalie took off her veil and jumped into the sea, swimming towards the struggling person. Unfortunately, her wedding dress became too heavy when soaked, and she almost got swallowed by the sea. I immediately jumped in without thinking, using all my strength to rescue her. By the time I pulled her to shore, I had exhausted all my energy. "Francis, go save Herschel." Before I could speak, Rosalie pushed me back into the water. Waves crashed one after another. I felt myself being pulled deeper into the sea. I swam desperately, my body sinking. The only person I could call for help was Rosalie. Cough, cough. Not far away, Herschel had been rescued by someone else and was holding his chest, coughing non-stop. As the waves surged again, I held my breath and dove underwater, only surfacing with great effort when the waves receded. I saw Rosalie running towards Herschel's back. Her figure grew smaller, almost as if she had unhesitatingly abandoned me. The last thing I saw was Rosalie hugging Herschel, patting his back. The two were close together, her white wedding dress looking so pure and beautiful. Everything had signs to follow. Rosalie always said she didn't love Herschel, but between him and me, she chose him without hesitation. I couldn't pretend I didn't see it anymore. When I woke up again, I was in the hospital. My mom was by my bedside, her eyes red from crying. "Francis, you finally woke up. Are you hungry or thirsty? Is anything bothering you?" I groggily shook my head. Just as I opened my mouth to speak, a pain shot through my lungs, making me cough uncontrollably. "Don't speak yet. The doctor said you inhaled too much water." My mom quickly got up to pat my back, feeling so distressed. "Don't ever go to the beach for wedding photos again. It's too dangerous. Thankfully you were saved. Otherwise, I'd sue their company until it goes bankrupt." So it was the studio staff who saved me. I remained silent. My mind was filled with the fear of being swallowed by the sea. Thank goodness you and Rosalie are both fine. Otherwise, how would the 4 of us old folks live? I looked down at my hospital gown. "Francis, you're worried about Rosalie, right? She's fine. She came by while you were unconscious. She went to see a friend who also fell into the sea. That place is really dangerous. No matter how beautiful it is, you all must never go there again. No more. There won't be another time." I closed my eyes, feeling very tired. My mom told me to rest well. She went out to buy me some daily necessities. I don't know how long it had been when the door opened again. I turned my head, ready to call for my mom, but found Rosalie standing at the door with red eyes. I couldn't be bothered to look at her expression and turned my gaze away. She walked over in high heels, standing by my bed and looking at me. "Aren't you supposed to be exercising every day? How come you're so weak?" She started off by scolding me. A dull pain shot through my chest, but it disappeared in an instant. I hoarsely retorted, "Rosalie, in your heart, your childhood friend is more important than your fiancé. Important enough that you could watch me drown without looking back." "I'm sorry." Her voice sounded a bit aggrieved. "I thought you could swim back." Herschel was in bad shape, so I instinctively went to check on him. I nodded. "So you love him, right?" Everything made sense now. The bond between childhood friends was irreplaceable. In that second, all my feelings and unwillingness seemed to be washed away by the sea. Rosalie denied it. "I love you. I just see him as an older brother." "Forget your brother." I couldn't help but cough a couple of times, and she bent down to pour me some water. After a moment, I said, "Rosalie, let's end this. I don't love you anymore." Hearing this, she slammed the cup down on the table. "Our 6 years of love is ending over a small matter?" I looked into her angry eyes, filled with emotions I couldn't understand. I slowly said, "I saved you, but you pushed me into the sea for a stranger. I didn't have the strength to call for help, and you just walked away without looking back. I almost drowned, and you call that a small matter?" She suddenly broke down, collapsing onto me in tears. "Honey, I was wrong." This was her first apology and the first time she called me honey. "I really thought you could swim back. Honey, I was wrong. Please forgive me." I pushed her away directly. "It's your fault, but I won't forgive you. Rosalie Slater, we're done. You can leave now." She looked up, shocked. Then her voice rose. "Francis Lloyd, I've already apologized and promised there wouldn't be a next time. Don't be so unreasonable." I was annoyed. "Don't you understand? I said we're done. Please leave." At that moment, the door burst open. "Are you getting bold now?" Herschel Jimenez charged in, looking down at me with disdain. "Rosalie already said it wasn't intentional and cried while apologizing. What else do you want?" I looked up at him, unable to suppress a cold laugh. Was my usual silence making him think I was weak? "Who do you think you are, coming here to blame me?" Herschel Jimenez glared at me angrily, scoffing. "I grew up with Rosalie. She's my sister. I can't stand to see you bully her." I picked up a water cup that had spilled and took a sip, wetting my throat, and smirked. "If you care for Rosalie Slater so much, why don't you just marry her? He's a playboy. If he wanted to marry her, he would have done it long ago. Why keep Rosalie Slater hanging for so many years?" Herschel Jimenez replied with righteous indignation. "I see Rosalie as my sister, and she loves you." I didn't know if it was my words or his that turned Rosalie's face pale, devoid of color. I laughed out loud. "Well, you two really have a deep sibling bond. She risked her fiancé's life for you after just a couple of coughs." Herschel's fists clenched. "You're not dead, so stop talking about Rosalie like that." I smashed the cup. "Don't flaunt your love in front of me. If you don't leave, I won't hold back." Rosalie looked at me, disbelief written all over her face. "Do you really have to be this unreasonable?" Unreasonable? I still vividly remembered the feeling of struggling to swim to the surface, being submerged by wave after wave, the suffocating pain of seawater pouring into my nose and filling my lungs. That silent, desperate feeling is something I will never forget for the rest of my life. "I need to rest. Please leave." "Fine, you're the one pushing me away. Don't regret it." Rosalie angrily dragged Herschel out. An hour later, my mom rushed back to the hospital, and the first thing she did was check my forehead. I frowned. "Mom, what are you doing?" She touched my head and then placed her forehead against mine, murmuring, "Temperature is normal, son. You didn't fry your brain. Are you going to break up with Rosalie?" "Yes. You're getting married at the end of the year." "I don't love her anymore." My mom became flustered. "Don't love her? You were happily taking wedding photos yesterday, and today you don't love her? Did you drink too much seawater and go crazy?" I met Rosalie Slater in our freshman year. It was love at first sight. We spent a happy college life together. After graduation, we met each other's parents. and 2 years later we set our wedding date for the end of the year. I thought I could be happy with Rosalie forever until her childhood friend returned to the country. At first, Rosalie's opinion of Herschel Jimenez was that he was a playboy, a scoundrel. She even passionately recounted how they dated briefly, only to break up because Herschel changed his mind. She hated him. She said if it weren't for their childhood friendship, she would have blocked him long ago. She wouldn't contact him, but they often sang together, traveled together, played games together. She said she didn't want to play a support role with low presence. She wanted to be the marksman while I played the tank to absorb damage for her. But once Herschel returned, I was no longer her first choice for duo matches. She began playing support, constantly hanging on Herschel. Her instinct was no longer toward me. When I was too weak, it was her who pushed me into the sea, and it was also her who turned her back on my cries for help. My mom turned pale with anger upon hearing this and immediately called my dad to arrange the annulment of the engagement. I really misjudged her. My fiancée is worse than a passing girl, nearly causing my son's death. Once she hung up, I asked in confusion, "Wasn't she a studio staff member?" "Mom doesn't know who it was exactly, just heard that you were swept far away. A girl discovered you and struggled to bring you back to shore, performing CPR to save you. It was too chaotic at the time, and she didn't get a chance to leave her contact information. Mom has already sent someone to investigate. We must thank the benefactor properly when the time comes." I nodded in agreement. The next morning, Uncle Slater and Aunt Slater came to the hospital in person. I heard that before coming to the hospital, they first went to apologize to my parents. They were furious, especially Mr. Slater, who heard that he almost laid hands on Rosalie Slater. Mrs. Slater was so angry she could hardly contain herself. "Francis, I've already scolded Rosalie fiercely. She grew up with Herschel Jimenez. They have a sibling-like bond." In a moment of panic, she acted without thinking. "She has always loved you." Mr. Slater gritted his teeth and slammed his thigh. "That brat Herschel Jimenez. Why was he there when you were taking wedding photos? Yesterday, I had your uncle deal with him. There better not be a next time." Then Mr. and Mrs. Slater unleashed a barrage of curses on Herschel Jimenez. They also called Rosalie Slater in front of me. "Where are you? Come to the hospital right now." The wind on the other end of the call was deafening, almost drowning out Rosalie's voice. "Francis Lloyd wants to break up with me. Why should I go to the hospital? I'm not going." Uncle Slater's face turned pale with anger as he yelled into the phone. "Francis is just too upset. You need to come to the hospital and apologize right away." On the other end, I faintly heard Herschel Jimenez's voice. "We're about to make a big turn. Hold on tight." Then I heard Rosalie's voice. "Dad, I have something to do right now. I'll hang up." "You little brat." Mr. Slater was so furious he threw his phone. But realizing I was still there, he put it away and took a few deep breaths to calm down. When he turned back, his face was calm. "Rosalie is busy with work. She'll come over to apologize in person later." My mom stood up directly. "Old Slater, Rosalie is with that boy. He even told her to hold on tighter. Since they're already so close, don't drag my son into this. My son isn't someone who can just be trifled with." Uncle Slater was embarrassed at being exposed and glared at Aunt Slater. "Look at what kind of daughter you've raised." Aunt Slater felt wronged as well, but thinking of comforting me first, she said, "Francis, you focus on healing your injuries. Your uncle and I will go get Rosalie back and plead for your forgiveness." Hearing Rosalie's name made me lose my appetite, and I threw the apple in my hand into the trash can. "She doesn't need to come. We've already broken up." Finally, Mr. and Mrs. Slater stormed out, saying they would seek justice for me. After a few days of recovery in the hospital, I was finally free to move around. During this time, Mr. and Mrs. Slater hadn't come back, probably because Rosalie wouldn't back down, and they felt ashamed to face me again. This was just as well. Since I decided to break up with Rosalie, I wanted to do it thoroughly. I drove to the new house. This place once held my dreams for the future. Every brick and tile in the villa was handpicked by me on trips to the building materials market, chosen according to Rosalie's preferences. The decoration style was also the English style she liked. She said she wanted to have 2 children for me in the future, preparing the nursery and maid's room on the first floor for the kids to play. To the right upon entering was the garden, and to the left was the vegetable patch. She even bought many seeds to practice planting vegetables, wanting our baby to eat the veggies she grew. At this moment, the soil in the vegetable patch was so dry it was cracking, making it impossible to plant anything. Just like my relationship with Rosalie, it would never bloom or bear fruit again. While packing things up, looking at everything familiar, my mind was filled with memories of Rosalie, but all of this should be decisively thrown away. Just as I was about to leave, the door swung open from the outside. Rosalie saw me, first surprised, then a flash of panic crossed her face. Herschel Jimenez was behind her, dressed in all black trendy clothing, with marten boots and gray hair adorned with shiny ear studs. He looked every bit the stylish guy. Rosalie appeared somewhat stunned. "Francis, what are you doing here?" But then she revealed a knowing smile, seemingly certain I was here to seek forgiveness and was just being jealous. Don't get me wrong. My car is in for maintenance, and Herschel was just giving me a ride back. I looked past Rosalie and fixed my gaze on Herschel Jimenez. He was indeed a genuine handsome guy. No wonder Rosalie couldn't forget him, tangled up with him. "Nice to see you again." I smiled at him. Herschel looked surprised, his expression strange as he stared at me. Then, I raised my arm to block the two of them and said calmly, "Ms. Slater, this is the wedding house I prepared. Now that we've broken up, please don't set foot here again, and make sure to move all your things out today." After 6 years of dating, I had never spoken such harsh words to her. I had never even called her Ms. Slater. Rosalie was furious. "Francis Lloyd, how much more do you want to make a scene?" I explained it was just a coincidence. "Must you be so sarcastic in front of Herschel? He was kind enough to give me a ride. Can't I have contact with male friends while being with you? Just because of that little incident you wanted to break up, and now you want to kick me out? I really misjudged you." The more Rosalie spoke, the angrier she became, even lunging at my chest. I quickly grabbed her wrist. "Rosalie Slater, we've broken up. You must move out of my house with your people. And I don't like you. Stop being delusional, thank you." Rosalie's eyes widened as she looked at me, but there was no longer a trace of affection for her in my eyes. She was so angry that she shouted, "Fine, I don't like you anymore either." She turned around, stood on her tiptoes, and went to kiss Herschel Jimenez. Herschel also held her close, and the two immediately became inseparable in their kiss. Is this a performance of a French kiss for me? Sorry, I'm not interested. Have you had enough of kissing? Do I need to wait until I call the police to report you for illegally trespassing before you stop? I really dialed 110. It didn't matter how reckless Rosalie Slater was, but she was still a daughter of the Slater family and had to consider her parents' reputation. She gritted her teeth in anger. "Lloyd, you're ruthless. Who cares about your broken house?" Rosalie couldn't save face, so she immediately found a moving company to take her things away. As she was leaving, she dropped a harsh remark. "Don't come begging me in the future." In front of her, I made a phone call. "I need to move the bed and sofa and disinfect the whole place." Her face instantly turned a mix of green and red. After sorting out my emotions, I got back to work. The first thing I did at the office was to have my assistant put my house up for sale. After being away from the company for a while, work piled up like a mountain. By the time I finished, it was already 2 in the afternoon. I went downstairs to eat, only to be told that my favorite tomato beef stew was sold out. I sighed just as I was about to leave. Suddenly, a plate of fragrant beef stew was placed in front of me. I looked up to see a girl with a small tiger tooth smiling at me. "Looks like you're all better and can come out to enjoy good food now." I raised an eyebrow slightly. She playfully winked. "Next time I save someone, I'll make sure they can open their eyes. Otherwise, they won't even recognize their savior." I immediately realized and hurriedly said, "You saved me. Thank you. What do you want to eat?" "It's on me. I want to eat exotic delicacies. Can we?" I answered sincerely, "Of course, but we need to change locations." "Sure, but we don't have time today. I'll be late for work." She casually took out her phone. "Let's exchange numbers and set another time for a nice meal." I was so exhausted dragging you back to shore that I ended up in the hospital for 3 days. I deserve a good meal. I felt it was only right. Okay. Then we exchanged numbers. Benefactor, what's your name? Trisha. I saved Trisha's name in my contacts. I'm Lloyd. Francis Lloyd. Trisha jumped in first to show me her phone. She had already saved my name. She laughed. "Senior, you're quite famous in South China. So that's how it is." I smiled back at her. "So you're my junior. How did Trisha know who I was?" It must be thanks to the envy-inducing relationship I had with Rosalie Slater that was all the rage in the school. I heard that our story still circulates in the school, which is why Trisha, 3 grades below me, recognized me. I asked Trisha about the day I nearly drowned and learned that she had gone to the beach alone to clear her mind when she discovered me struggling in the water. At 5 feet tall, she used all her strength to drag me ashore and was exhausted in the hospital for 3 days before recovering. I felt guilty and wanted to compensate her, but she refused, only agreeing to let me treat her to a meal. As it was getting close to work time, we each headed back to our offices. As soon as I arrived, Rosalie was already seated inside. "Where have you been?" I thought, does it matter where I went? Since we decided to break up, I completely let go and blocked all of Rosalie's contact methods, no longer reaching out to her. I might feel a bit out of sorts, but compared to life, this little discomfort isn't even a scratch. And her? Without the considerate care and love she had for 6 years, aside from clinging to Herschel, what else can she do? But Herschel is a playboy. He won't promise her a future like I did. Rosalie stepped closer, wanting to hold my hand, but then pulled back. The look in her eyes carried a hint of loneliness. "In the past few days, I've been going to that hot pot restaurant on East Street by myself every day to eat spicy hot pot." I nodded perfunctorily and walked past her back to my desk. Seeing her made me irritable. Her eyes gradually turned red. "Every time I get so spicy that I can't swallow. You like spicy food but always accompanied me to eat light Cantonese dishes. When I cried from the spice, I thought, you must find it tasteless and unhappy, right? In our relationship, it was always you accommodating me, so I got used to you forgiving me for everything." Her expression was remorseful, yet she looked aggrieved, wanting me to comfort her. "Francis, I realize I was wrong now. I was getting a bit impatient. We've already broken up? What's the use of saying all this?" Tears welled up in her eyes, and I was truly losing my patience. "I need to work. If there's nothing else, please leave." "Francis." Her eyes were filled with sadness as she finally cried out, "I really don't love Herschel. I love you. I admit I was reckless because I thought you loved me so much, pampered me, and would never leave me, so you think that after I regained my life, I should continue to unconditionally tolerate you?" I interrupted her words. She bit her lip and cried even harder. I had completely lost my patience. "Rosalie Slater, don't reminisce about the past after losing everything. It's all over. But I still love you. What must I do for you to forgive me?" she asked sadly. I slid my chair back a bit. "Just don't appear in front of me." She rushed in front of me, grabbing my hand. You don't say things that hurt me insincerely. That will only push us further apart. Is this woman out of her mind? I can't afford to provoke her, but I can avoid her." I hurriedly left the office and told the security guard not to let Rosalie back into the company. As soon as I got home, I received a WeChat message from Trisha. "Brother, I'm free on Saturday." I quickly replied, "All right, let's meet on Saturday." On Saturday morning, I went to pick up Trisha Jenkins as promised. She ran towards me in casual clothes, a little sweat on her forehead. "Brother, let's go." She smiled at me, revealing her little tiger teeth. "Don't run, why the rush? I went to the trunk to grab a bottle of water for her. Brother, girls prefer milk tea. I could sense a hint of a pout in her tone. Okay. I chuckled. Let's go buy milk tea. Thanks, brother. Trisha squinted her eyes and smiled, making the day feel even brighter. I drove straight to the milk tea shop. Before I could ask her what she wanted, she was already getting out of the car to order for herself, then turned to ask me, Brother, what do you want? Rosalie Slater controlled her weight and never drank milk tea, nor did she let me have any. Now that we were here, I really wanted some, but since I hadn't ordered before, I was afraid I wouldn't like it. Anything's fine. Then I'll get the same as you. Holding 2 identical cups of milk tea, I turned to look at Trisha, feeling an unexpected sense of ease in my heart. As we enjoyed our milk tea, I asked her where she wanted to eat. Trisha suggested that I accompany her to the mall, and I agreed. It was perfect since she didn't accept my feelings. This way, I could repay her in a different way. I accompanied Trisha from the 1st floor to the 5th floor. She ended up buying 4 affordable items but completely didn't give me a chance to pay. She said, Thanks for accompanying me, brother. I fell out with my best friend, so I have no one to shop with. Happy to help. After shopping, Trisha said she wanted to eat hot pot. I stared at her. Just hot pot. She looked unfazed. Hot pot is the delicacy in my heart. This interpretation wasn't wrong either. But I didn't expect that the hot pot restaurant she chose was my favorite one on East Street. Brother, how do you feel about spicy food? I used to love it, but it's been a while since I had any, so I'm not sure about my tolerance now. I replied honestly. She chattered like a little sparrow, arranging today's menu. Let's order mild spice first. We won't take the spicy beef, or the broth will be too hot. Normally, mild spice wouldn't be a problem, but since I hadn't eaten it in a long time, I was sweating from the spice. Trisha quickly handed me a tissue. Brother, how about we switch to a Inyang pot instead? No need, just the red pot. Although it was spicy, it felt really satisfying. Brother, there's a tissue stuck to your skin. Trisha reminded me. I felt around but couldn't find it. Where is it? Trisha leaned in closer and gently removed the tissue for me. Right here. I instinctively straightened my posture. Thank you. No need to thank me. As Trisha just sat back down, before she could finish speaking, a sudden gust of wind swept past us, and I saw her hair get blown up. At the same time, someone rushed in front of us and slapped Trisha hard across the face. It was Rosalie Slater. You shameless woman. How dare you seduce my fiancée? Her voice was filled with anger and malice. I frowned and stepped in front of Trisha. Rosalie Slater, you're crazy. Ignoring me, she grabbed my arm and pushed me aside, staring at me fiercely. Not answering calls, not replying to messages. So you found someone new. A surge of anger shot up from my feet. This woman was really something. Are you done throwing your tantrum? Me throwing a tantrum? That statement seemed to touch her sore spot as she pointed at me and yelled, You were clearly caught dating someone else. She was making such a scene that customers in the hot pot restaurant turned to look, some even taking out their phones to record. I didn't care, but I couldn't let Trisha suffer unjustly. I said sternly, Rosalie Slater, I'll say it one more time. We ended things a long time ago. Slap. I didn't notice when Trisha moved parallel to me, and she slapped Rosalie Slater. This is for you. Rosalie was furious and swung her fist at Trisha. I quickly blocked Rosalie, shielding Trisha behind me. Trisha was still furious behind me, shouting, You were the one who wronged my brother first. How dare you come here to accuse him? When you were with him, you were all over that male third party, pushing my brother into the sea and almost drowning him. What right do you have to stand here? I like my brother, so what? You guys canceled the wedding and officially broke up. Such a good man is single again. Can't I like him? Ms. Slater, don't be too greedy. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You don't deserve it. I never knew Trisha could be so fierce with her words. Tears welled up in Rosalie's eyes as she looked at me pitifully, begging me to intervene. Without a moment's hesitation, I took Trisha and left. Trisha, I'll take you to the hospital. Frances Lloyd, you? As I passed by her, I saw her face filled with shock and undeniable sadness. It seemed she finally realized she had lost me. I took Trisha to the hospital. The doctor said there were no cuts, no major issues, and didn't even prescribe any medicine before letting us leave. I'm sorry. Sitting in the car, I felt a deep sense of guilt. Trisha Jenkins shouldn't have to bear all this because of me. I've already returned everything, so I'm not at a loss. Besides, it was her who hit me, not you. Trisha smiled, a bright and cheerful laugh. The words she said earlier at the hot pot restaurant. I hesitated, unsure how to ask, but she suddenly said, "Senior brother, do you remember that pancake shop at the south gate of Huanan? What's going on in this girl's mind? Thinking about that at a time like this? Of course. I'm not full from dinner, and I suddenly want to eat pancakes." Out of guilt, I readily agreed. "Shall I take you there now?" "Sure." She smiled again. I couldn't help but feel this girl had been hit so hard that she was acting silly, still wearing that radiant smile. I took Trisha to the pancake stall in Huanan, and we both chose the one with shredded potatoes and eggs. The pancakes, freshly cooked, were still steaming, and Trisha's pleasant voice floated through the steam. "Senior brother, do you know when I started liking potato pancakes?" I shook my head. One New Year's Day, my grandma was critically ill, my phone and wallet were stolen. I couldn't get a cab and I had no money for food. When I asked my classmates for help, everyone thought I was a scammer. When I was at my lowest, a couple started arguing. I heard the girl say she couldn't eat starch at night or she would gain weight, and then she walked away without looking back. The guy hesitated for a long time but didn't chase after her. I saw his eyes were red, and he saw me, who had just been crying. He came over and asked if I wanted a potato pancake. I was so hungry that I had no choice but to agree. I thought he would give me the one his girlfriend didn't want, but he bought me a new one. And when he found out I didn't have a phone, he helped me call a cab. Trisha's eyes were filled with my reflection. Actually, I don't love potato pancakes, but since that day, I've fallen for them. This scene felt oddly familiar. The male lead Trisha spoke of seemed to be me. I remembered a time when Rosalie Slater got really mad at me over a pancake. I felt wronged and frustrated, with nowhere to vent, when I turned and saw a girl with a nose red from the cold and swollen eyes from crying. I felt a pang of sympathy. I spoke honestly. "To be honest, I bought you a new one because I felt embarrassed. It was a matter of face." She looked at me with a smile. "It doesn't matter. The result is that you helped me. And from then on, you have a filter in my heart." Senior brother, since we can meet again, and you're single now, can you give me a chance to pursue you? A piece of pancake almost choked me. Are girls today this direct? My ears turned a bit hot, feeling embarrassed as a grown man couldn't handle such teasing. I said seriously, "You also saw that my last relationship wasn't resolved properly, so I can't give you an answer right now." She playfully smiled. "No worries. I'll line up first, and then I'll have priority for admission." It can be like this? That day, Rosalie Slater was furious. It said that as soon as she got home, she caused a huge scene, prompting her dad to immediately terminate the cooperation with my family. Business isn't child's play. With the project halfway through, if one side withdraws, both sides will suffer major losses. Seeing how heated our parents were getting, they decided to meet again to clear the air. I didn't want to go. If she wanted to cause a scene, let her. I'd just ignore it. But my parents were worried about the company's reputation and dragged me to the Slaters. Uncle Slater and Aunt Slater were thrilled to see me come over and immediately brought me coffee. "Francis, don't take it to heart with Rosalie. She's just childish. We don't expect her to be sensible. We just hope you two can part amicably without affecting the business. If you both shake hands and make up, then we can consider this matter settled. We'll still be business partners." I stated first, "Uncle, Aunt, my breakup with her has nothing to do with business. As long as the project is right, I don't mind continuing to cooperate." Both sets of parents turned to look at Rosalie. She remained silent, just staring at me. I ignored her. She suddenly sneered. "Francis Lloyd, are you happy to let your new girlfriend hit me and take her to the hospital while leaving me behind?" Everyone was stunned. Uncle Slater reprimanded her. "Rosalie, what new girlfriend? What are you talking about? Francis Lloyd has already cheated. He watched his new girlfriend hit me and then left me to take his precious one to the hospital." Rosalie's words dripped with sarcasm. "Clearly, you were the one who cheated first, yet you want to put all the blame on me. Francis Lloyd, you're not a real man." I shot back. "We've already broken up. Is it only okay for you to hug and cuddle with other men while I can't have new feelings?" Rosalie, furious and embarrassed, slammed her hand on the table, her eyes red. "Even now, you're still trying to argue?" That overbearing look was exactly like how she used to be when we were together, unreasonable as ever. She had always been like this, only believing in what she thought, never considering other people's perspectives. I felt incredibly relieved that I chose to leave. Otherwise, I would have remained trapped in her torment for a lifetime. I smiled. "That day, you pushed me into the sea and then took care of Herschel Jimenez without a thought for my life. It was Trisha Jenkins who fought tooth and nail to pull me back from the brink of death. I was planning to pursue her. Is there a problem with that?" The Jenkins family was stunned. My parents were shocked as well, probably not expecting that I would have a new goal so soon. Rosalie Slater, furious to the point of laughter, pointed at me and said fiercely, "You finally admitted it. Very, very good. You're right, I do love Herschel Jimenez. You're just a substitute. I'm about to marry him, and from now on, we'll be strangers." After saying that, she rubbed her red-rimmed eyes and resolutely turned away. But her steps were slow. I knew she was hoping I would try to win her back. So I called out to her, "Wait." Rosalie Slater immediately stopped, lifted her chin, and said coldly, "Speak." I replied, "Once our projects are done, we won't work together anymore. Don't invite me to your wedding, and I won't invite you to mine." She suddenly froze, her hands clenched into fists, and turned to glare at me fiercely. "Fine, remember what you said." Rosalie Slater left, leaving two bewildered sets of parents behind. I rubbed my nose and said my goodbyes. I no longer offered explanations. I went to the supermarket and bought a lot of snacks and food to find Trisha Jenkins. When she saw me, she was astonished. "Senior brother? What are you doing here?" "Just came to see you." She immediately cleared a spot and smiled. "Come in. It's cold outside. I just bought a bunch of groceries. They're nice and warm. I'll take them to the kitchen first." She followed behind. "You bought groceries? I didn't eat breakfast this morning. What are we having?" "We didn't finish the hot pot yesterday, so today we'll have a proper meal." Trisha's eyes sparkled with a smile. "Sounds great." Then, she rolled up her sleeves to pick and wash the vegetables while I was in charge of cutting them. We worked together smoothly. Watching her busy figure, I snapped a side profile of her preparing the ingredients and edited a caption to post on my social media. Caption: "My girl." She heard the sound of the camera and turned her head. "Senior brother, are you taking pictures?" "Just of the ingredients, posting on social media." She quickly wiped her hands. "I want to be the first to like it." Trisha was stunned when she saw my post, disbelief on her face. "Senior brother, you promised?" she asked, her face full of hope. I nodded. "Girlfriend. You can't call me senior brother anymore. Francis Lloyd." She leaped into my arms, crying tears of joy. "I love you." Wow, she just confessed. I held her, my ears turning red. "Let's keep it low-key." "How do we keep it low-key?" She winked at me and suddenly stood on her tiptoes to place a kiss on the corner of my lips. "Is this low-key enough?" Goodness, how can a girl take the initiative like this? I bent down and lifted her up, wrapping my arms around her waist to deepen the kiss. After a satisfying meal at Trisha's house, I headed home. Unexpectedly, I found Rosalie Slater standing at my doorstep, looking like a heartbroken woman. She stared at my face, fists clenched, her whole body trembling with anger. You're with Trisha Jenkins now? And you kissed her? I raised an eyebrow. What does that have to do with you? Francis Lloyd, you really don't love me anymore. Do you really hate me that much? Do you have to use another woman to provoke me? I was exasperated. Rosalie Slater, stop playing the victim. If I don't love you, then I don't love you. There's no hatred involved. Please stop bothering me. Okay? Rosalie closed her eyes in despair, tears streaming down her face. Fine. Remember the despair you've given me, and don't regret it later. She yanked off the engagement necklace I gave her and threw it to the ground, storming away. She left, completely heartbroken. That afternoon, I saw on social media that Rosalie Slater posted her marriage certificate. Caption: My him, childish. Did she think I would care or get angry seeing this? Without love, she had nothing left to rely on for her reckless behavior. Even if she married 10 times, I wouldn't spare her a glance. I quickly blocked her on social media. The next day, I heard from my parents that the Jenkins family was in turmoil. Herschel Jimenez had just married Rosalie Slater and immediately went to a hotel with a young model. Mrs. Jenkins was so furious that she was hospitalized. Mr. Jenkins wanted to sever ties with Rosalie. My mom asked if I wanted to visit Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins, but I declined. Not only did I not want to visit, but I also wanted to keep my distance. That day, I moved in with Trisha Jenkins. Every day, we went to work together, shopped for groceries after work, cooked at home, and traveled during our days off. Although life was simple, it was peaceful. The next time I heard from Rosalie was 3 months later. She was divorced from Herschel Jimenez. One night, she called me crying. Francis, I was wrong. I really was wrong. I shouldn't have acted impulsively and married him. Can you come back? Please, don't abandon me. I interrupted her. Who are you? Do I know you? I hung up and blocked her again. A hand climbed up my neck, the voice coy. Who is it? Advertisement. My lips were sealed. Shall we continue? Of course.